Far away on the Mexican border, a drug dealer was leisurely delivering a tiger when he suddenly saw spikes being pulled out in front of him. However, when he reacted, it was already too late. In this way, he was successfully intercepted by the mysterious man. However, when he took out his gun and prepared to check the situation, he was suddenly pointed at his head with a gun, and then he was tied up. The man was Mike, who was regarded as the god of war. He took out an electric saw and started cutting the tires of the truck. As expected, he successfully found what he wanted. It turned out that just a few days ago, Mike's daughter-in-law had taken a fancy to a villa. So he brought Mike to see how it works, but actually, he wanted Mike to buy it. So Mike came up with the idea of robbing Uncle Ding Ding's drug money. He came to Uncle Ding Ding's ice cream shop at night and secretly observed their every move. Without absolute certainty, Mike would never do it. After locking Uncle Ding Ding's vehicle, Mike began to follow it quietly during the day. He saw Uncle Ding Ding's vehicle was locked in a factory building, and then a van came. After the van was backed in, it also closed the door secretly. It seems that they must be hiding drug money. Mike heard the sound of changing tires inside, and he concluded that the tires were where they hid the drug money. Then Mike went home and bought a water pipe. With the help of his granddaughter, he punched a lot of small holes on it. The daughter-in-law was surprised to see this scene. The daughter told her mother that they were making a special hose. Mike explained that it was used to water flowers. At night, Mike made it into a thorn belt full of nails. The next day, Mike set up a trap in the place where they must pass, and then used a pulley to put the wire rope through, and then hid in the dark and waited for Uncle Ding Ding's truck to come. Everything was under Mike's control, and the truck was successfully stopped. The car Mike drove here was also a broken car he bought temporarily, because he didn't plan to kill anyone. Even if the driver saw the car, he wouldn't know who did it. The name of this episode is Set in Stone, which also implies that Mike is 100% sure of his actions, but this is not the end. He continued to come to Uncle Ding Ding's ice cream shop at night to observe the situation. Uncle Ding Ding was furious when he learned that he had been robbed. He could only rely on taking medicine to control himself. This was also a lesson for Mike to learn from Uncle Ding Ding's threat to his family. Mike, who had robbed a huge sum of money, did not forget to do some good things to comfort himself, because before this, he had comforted his son in this way. The next morning, Mike came to the old place to eat. He bought a newspaper to see if there would be any news reports about the car he robbed. But he couldn't find it after looking through the newspapers. Then he received a call from Nei Chow. The two came to the agreed place. Chow guessed that Uncle Ding Ding's car belonged to Sister Mike, because people in their line of work would not leave anyone alive. Based on Nei Chow's understanding of Mike, he concluded that only Mike would do this. Nei Chow came to find Mike just to confirm how he knew to hide in the tire. He suspected that the driver and Mike were in the same group. If not, during the robbery, if the driver saw Uncle Ding Ding Mike, he might suspect that it was the leak. Mike ridiculed them for overestimating their IQ. He made it clear that he had done it perfectly. After getting a definite answer, Nei Chow left with peace of mind. However, Mike questioned why this case was not on the headlines of the newspaper, because Mike wanted the police to pay attention to this case, so that the police would be able to investigate Ding Ding Shuzhen's business. Nei Chow saw that Mike's purpose was to take revenge on Uncle Ding Ding. Nei Chow said that Uncle Ding Ding had long forgotten Mike, and if there were no clues, he would not suspect Mike. Nei Chow was a little angry at Mike's behavior, because if the police find Uncle Ding, they will find him too. He was ready to pull out his gun to warn Mike, but in the end, he was swayed by Mike's calm demeanor. Mike promised that after this incident, his dealings with Uncle Ding would be over. Hearing this, Nei Chow could only leave helpless. Mike asked again why this incident hadn't made it to the newspaper, and Nei Chow replied that they had cleaned everything up. After Mike left, a good Samaritan came across the bound driver and untied him. Later, Uncle Ding and his crew received the information and returned to the scene, where they rescued the driver and then killed the good Samaritan, burying him in the desert. This was their way of cleaning things up. Hearing this, Mike's confusion was clear, but he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease, knowing he had indirectly caused the death of an innocent person. It seemed that his feud with Uncle Ding was far from over. Meanwhile, Jimmy, who had just been scolded by Little Jin, had no choice but to return to work diligently. However, old habits die hard. Jimmy still habitually took shortcuts in his own way, but was stopped in time by the nanny and secretary, arranged by the boss. Even when Jimmy wanted to wash his hands when he went to the toilet, he ran into Bill, the district attorney he had dealt with before. He heard that Jimmy had joined the famous DM law firm and learned that the company gave him top treatment. Bill, who had lost all his hair in the green world, had never encountered such treatment. He saw that Jimmy, who used to chase after him every day to beg for mercy, suddenly surpassed him. Bill, that's just pure envy and jealousy. As he was leaving, he couldn't help but mutter under his breath. One night, while Jimmy was at the company-provided apartment watching TV, he accidentally saw an ad for the DM law firm regarding a high-profile case. But to Jimmy's disappointment, his own ad had been taken down, and the boss reverted to the old ways of advertising. It seems the firm decided to continue running ads after seeing the results from Jimmy's ad. On the surface, it looks like the company has provided Jimmy with a great platform. In reality, they have various reasons to limit Jimmy's development. He seems like an outsider. No matter how capable he is, he can't overshadow the boss. Although the company-provided apartment is spacious and comfortable, to Jimmy, it feels like a cage that restricts him. In the end, he decides to return to the small office in the nail salon he rented, even though it's a bit cramped. But this is his territory. And finally, Jimmy can sleep soundly. The next day, although Little Jin has regained his position, Howard doesn't seem to fully forgive him. Because Chuck mentioned he would help Little Jin plead his case, it seems he really did it. Little Jin explained to Howard that he didn't ask Chuck to bring it up, but Howard maintained a stern expression and didn't respond. Is this also part of Chuck's act? As Howard kept his serious face on, he was about to meet a client when he immediately put on a professional fake smile, which really made one question his acting skills. He has a thing with Chuck, and after meeting the client, Little Jin quickly adjusted his demeanor to handle the Mesa Verde Bank clients. Little Jin hurriedly arrived at the courthouse for the changes in the high-profile case. Even in a 1v2 situation, he didn't lose any momentum. Although the case didn't have a chance of winning, his spirit impressed his opponents. When the court adjourned, Richie caught up with Little Jin and invited him to lunch. He had some understanding of Little Jin's career and noticed that Howard wasn't giving him much support, so he started thinking about inviting Little Jin to develop his career at his law firm. And as a partner, no less. Although it sounds tempting, Little Jin didn't agree right away. After Richie left, Little Jin sat in the restaurant, lost in thought. He looked out at the successful people outside, and then back at the olive branch Richie had thrown his way. He realized that only by switching jobs could he get more opportunities. Just as he was about to call Richie to accept the offer, the waiter suddenly said someone wanted to buy him a drink. It turned out to be the guy he had just seen outside the window. Unexpectedly, this guy had just broken up with a woman, and was already trying to hit on someone new. Xiao Jin took advantage of the situation and wanted to see what tricks he could come up with. Meanwhile, Jimmy was working desperately under the supervision of 2 assistants. Seeing that it was Xiao Jin's call, Jimmy made the excuse that it was his elderly grandmother. Xiao Jin said that he had caught a big fish and asked Jimmy to help as soon as possible. Hearing this, Jimmy could no longer care about his work, so he rushed to the battlefield. With the support of the sly Jimmy, the man had no choice but to take the bait, because they had cooperated once before. Therefore, they were very tacit this time. In the end, their spoils were a check from the other party, but Xiao Jin did not intend to cash it, but just wanted to put it on the mirror as a souvenir. Xiao Jin told Jimmy about the job opportunity he encountered. Jimmy supported Xiao Jin's job change and asked him to take him with him when Howard resigned. Although the good opportunity was right in front of him, Xiao Jin did not seem very happy. He now realized that Jimmy came to work at DM Law Firm because he heard Xiao Jin say that. Jimmy hurried forward to comfort him and said some words against his will. He listed the generous treatment he had received one by one. Xiao Jin also saw that Jimmy was serious about him. He persuaded Xiao Jin to accept Richie's invitation. After the two kissed goodbye, they each ran to their own companies. Jimmy came to the car. His good mood was about to be ruined by this sad grass. How could he bear it? Jimmy took out a wrench from the trunk and violently dismantled the base of the sink. This also implied that he would no longer adapt to other people's rules. Doing what he wants to do is the most important thing. Before the trial, Jimmy designed a logo for his law firm. It seems that he already has a plan in mind. After the trial, he immediately contacted Xiao Jin and asked him if he had submitted his resignation to Howard. Xiao Jin felt that it was a bit hasty. Because he still hadn't received the job offer from Richie, Jimmy's purpose in calling was to check on Little Jin's progress in getting hired. He was starting to think about partnering with Little Jin to open a law firm together, and wanted to persuade him before he made the jump. So, Jimmy went to the DM law firm and asked his assistant to help him write a resignation letter. The assistant looked at Jimmy in surprise, unable to understand why he would want to resign when the company was treating him so well. He couldn't comprehend why Jimmy would do this. He also reminded Jimmy that if he resigned, the signing bonus he had received would also be paid in full. Phoenix's assistant clearly remembered that Jimmy's contract was for 1 year. Hearing this, Jimmy quickly took out the contract to check in. As the assistant said, it seemed that he was a little impulsive. Jimmy found an excuse to take back what he had just said and asked him to keep it a secret. Now he wanted to find a way to get his boss to fire him. On the way home from get off work, Jimmy accidentally found an inflatable doll on the side of the road. Seeing his funny look, Jimmy was a little fascinated and got inspiration from it. Next, he started the plan to fire his boss, but Xiao Jin was completely different from Jimmy. He was strictly reviewing his resignation report, fearing that any sentence or word was inappropriate. At this moment, Jimmy, who had just been fired, suddenly rebelled. He said that he had something to talk to Xiao Jin, and he had to go to the conference room because he wanted to formally invite Xiao Jin to open a law firm with him. He even prepared a business card. Jimmy sincerely invited Xiao Jin to be his partner, and told Xiao Jin that he was fired from DM Law Firm. Compared with the newly established law firm, Xiao Jin felt it was still. It is more promising to escape to Richie. Jimmy said that even if Xiao Jin changed jobs, Richie would be the second Howard. This is the difference between working and starting a business. Seeing Jimmy's sincere attitude, Xiao Jin asked Jimmy if he would play all kinds of tricks like before if they became partners. Jimmy was going to swear to abide by the rules of the green world, but when he touched the ring left by Mako, he decided to be true to himself. Jimmy wanted to tie the two together in this way. He was afraid of losing Xiao Jin. But Little Jin stated that he now belonged to Jimmy and didn't necessarily have to work together. Then he continued to focus on his work. That evening, Jimmy drove his old beat-up car back, and his former assistant helped him move his beloved rosewood desk into his small studio. After saying goodbye to his assistant, Jimmy's law firm reopened. The next day, Little Jin went to Richie's SC law firm for an interview, which was really just a formality, as long as Little Jin was willing. They were eager to have him. However, just as Little Jin was about to say goodbye to a few people, he accidentally called Richie Howard. Although Richie graciously diffused the awkwardness, it reminded Little Jin of what Jimmy had said, that even if he worked here, Richie would just become the second Howard. He went to the rooftop parking lot, looking at the business card Jimmy had given him. lost in thought. Then he tore the card in half, seemingly having made a decision. Shortly after, Little Jin went to the nail salon to find Jimmy. Jimmy thought Little Jin had successfully been accepted by FC Law Firm, but Little Jin gave him an unexpected answer. Little Jin decided to take Jimmy's advice and start his own practice, but he disagreed with Jimmy's partnership model. Instead, he proposed that they split all expenses evenly. This way, Jimmy could work in his own way, and they wouldn't interfere with each other. This was indeed a surprise for Jimmy, but it was also a result he was quite satisfied with.